Hi, my name is Erin. I'm an artist, and if you've joined me on my channel before, I've made lots of videos about lino cut, which I'm still going to do. But in this video, I'm going to focus on some paintings that I'm about to make. I was recently accepted to this show that I've participated in before, but the point of this show, it's called the Pi Art Squared Show. The point of the show is that you paint on round wood panels. These wood panels are made by Rustic Burl and they are based out of Ontario, Canada. So I'm going to make this video about my painting process, creating some oil paintings on these wood panels for this show. I have about a month to make these paintings. I'm planning to do 3. Hopefully I at least finish 2 in this month time span. I'm a really slow painter and it takes me a really long time to get through paintings because I like meticulous detail. I've already started one. The series of paintings I'm going to make is about the water's surface. So they're kind of almost abstracted, but still realistic in that they're going to mimic the surface of water. So I've got a couple of reference photos that I've taken over some time, and I'm going to use those to help me make these paintings. So I hope you enjoy watching how I make paintings and me kind of rambling on about how I like to paint with oil paint. Let's jump into the video.
The first step that I'm going to take with my panels is I'm going to prime them with gesso. I like to use a craft sponge so I get a really smooth application. Gesso or some kind of primer is really important, especially with oil, because it creates a barrier between the paint and the surface. Oil will deteriorate your surfaces over time as it soaks in and eats away at the canvas or wood or whatever you're painting on. If you want your work to last, you need to take certain steps to prep your surfaces before you start painting. I usually do 2 to 3 layers of gesso so that the barrier is thick enough that the oil won't seep through it. Some artists like to do even more layers of gesso, and if you sand it lightly in between the coats, you get a super smooth surface to paint on. Before I start a painting, I like to spend some time mixing my palette. What I typically go for is a range of values of the major colors in my painting, so I'm not constantly mixing colors as I'm also trying to paint at the same time. This piece is mainly blues, so I start by mixing the darkest blue and then a range of lighter ones, and then a few shades of lighter grays and white, and then I'll start painting. I am going to speed this up because watching me paint in real time would be a very, very long video, but I wanted to start by showing you some real-time painting because it is a slow process as I carefully observe my reference image and apply the paint to my painting. One of the ways that I manage to meet deadlines for art shows is to commit to a certain amount of painting time per day, and I also consider the composition of my painting and how much detail I'm going to be able to accomplish before the deadline arrives, while also staying true to what I want to produce as an artist. Your best work is going to take time, and that's okay, but when dealing with hard deadlines, I like to consider those 2 things. Anyway, this is how far I made it on day 1, about 2.5 hours of painting, and doing some laundry in between to take some short breaks. The process that I'm working through when it comes to this piece is carefully laying down my colors so that there isn't too much additional mixing happening on my panel. Because this water surface has such a contrasting pattern of blue areas and white and gray areas, I want to keep my application precise, so I am filling in the largest shapes first and then carefully working on them and around them to build up detail. Because these are oil paints and they have a long working time, sometimes colors mix a little bit more than I intended, so I will wait for them to dry a bit as I work on other areas and then go back and touch them up later or at the end instead of overworking them. As I work with oils, I tend to lay down the most dominant color in the area that I'm working on first, and then I will add lighter or darker colors on top and build up details with smaller brushes, especially if the area has a larger area of one dominant color. This is called blocking in your colors when you lay down a large area of color first and then build up details on top. Using this method in your paintings helps you paint a lot faster so that you're not focusing on the details immediately when you start painting. You're focusing on the shapes and the areas of dominant color, and then you build up your details.
I've been recording the process of this painting for about a week and a half-ish, and I'm almost done. There's just one little stripe right there in the center area that I have to finish, but I'm really pleased with how it's turning out. I've spent around 2 hours each evening after work, working on it, just picking away slowly. Here's my palette. I keep it in the freezer wrapped in plastic wrap so that the oil paint doesn't dry, but I have just the right amount of paint left on it to get me through this last little section. So let's go, let's finish this one up, and then I'm gonna start the next one.
Just as I had started my first piece, I am going to spend some time mixing colors first. I am creating a range in value, but also slightly different blues as I make them lighter too. This painting's color palette is a bit simpler than the previous one, which is part of the reason why I chose this image for my second piece. Since I have a limited amount of time to create these artworks, and the first painting was much more complex and took me longer to complete, I wanted my second piece to be more unified in color overall so that I knew I could paint it faster. The other thing I did with my second painting is I cropped the image even closer than the first one. I zoomed in much further on my reference image so that the shapes and the sizes of the details would be larger and faster to paint. Because this piece has less intense contrast between areas of detail and color, I was able to block in my colors more with this piece. I laid down flat areas of a base color and then I would go over top of it with detail to add shadows or highlights or smaller details on top. This helps me paint much faster, especially because the base layer of oil paint makes the second detail layer glide on and blend in very easily. By blocking in a larger area of color first, I'm also able to use larger brushes, which helps me fill in the areas faster, and then I switch to smaller brushes to add my details on top.
This is after 2 sessions. The first session I had to mix my palette, and that took me a little bit because I just want to make sure my colors are all set up before I actually start painting. And now I'm working on it, and this one is a much less complicated composition compared to the first one. So because I'm on that time crunch, I chose one painting to be a little bit more time consuming and more complicated, and one of my paintings to be a little bit more simplified so that I could manage my time a little bit better. I'm really liking the color palette in this piece too compared to the other one because it's much softer, and there's little pops of pink in it because the pictures were taken at sunset and it was really pretty. 2 sessions in, about maybe 3.5 hours or so, and I'm lucky today because we had a little bit of a snow day, so I'm home at lunch from work and I can spend my afternoon painting. So let's get into it.
At this point in this piece, I wanted to make an example of the blocking in and then adding detail technique that I like to use when I paint. So I grabbed my larger paintbrush that I was using and filled in all of the largest shapes with the color that was taking up the majority of each separate shape that I was filling in. This creates a slick base layer with the oils, and then I can build up my details on top, which allows me to adjust the colors and blend things together very easily. I saved the pink and really dark blues that appear black until the end, as I wanted to keep those colors from mixing into the rest of the painting that would be surrounding them, but to also work with similar colors at the end of the painting. So my final step is to add the only colors that weren't blue based. While I'm on the topic of talking about artworks that I'm creating for an art show, I wanted to talk about how I find opportunities for shows for my artworks, and there are two things that I've noticed. The first is that it does take time to find the right resources and things to watch for, and you try a lot of things that don't work, and you try some things that do work, and you repeat some things, and you eliminate other things. It's a lot of trial and error. And then also involving myself in the art community, whether that's in person or online or both, is what has made things happen for me. I am still learning and figuring these things out, but really leaning into those two things have helped me a lot. If you have any other things that have worked for you, let me know in the comments. It's taken me years of seeing what's out there to find the things that I want to apply to. I have used things like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook, like social media, to connect with galleries and other artists. I also watch what other artists are doing to see if what they are doing might also be a good fit for me. And I use websites like Akimbo, which regularly emails me opportunities for artists. It has also taken me a long time to connect with galleries and shops so that I have consistent representation, but I have found that when I started making artwork that was true to me as an artist and as a person, these connections naturally started happening and have continued to work over time.
My paintings are done. So when I was painting this one, I found out that I was actually accepted to another show, which is called the Square Foot Show, which I really like to participate in. So because of the deadlines with that show versus this show, I'm only going to end up doing 2 panels for this one. So these are done. They've been drying for 4 or 5 days, so they will be mailed off shortly. What I have left to do is just paint the sides and sign the back and then package them up so that they can be sent off to the gallery. It's called the Pie Art Squared Show, and it's in a gallery in Toronto. So I'm gonna paint the sides, package them up, and then they'll be on their way.
One of my favorite ways to paint the sides of my canvases or panels is with a sponge. It doesn't have to be one of these craft sponges specifically, any sponge will do, but I like a sponge because it holds a lot of paint, and because it's a solid object, I find the paint doesn't creep over the edge and onto the front of the painting, which sometimes happens when I use a brush, like the bristles will kind of flick over the edge and bring paint with it. I find I spend a lot less time cleaning the front of the painting, and I also don't even have to bother with tape either. So this is just one of my favorite painting tips to share. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching me create some paintings, learned a little bit about my painting process and how I like to meet deadlines and find opportunities. I hope you will come back again to watch future videos. Please consider subscribing to my channel, and see you next time.